The neural interface crackled as Ambassador Vextron's consciousness merged with the collective's war matrix. Around the curved walls of the command nexus, holographic displays showed the coordinates that had haunted the hegemony's greatest strategists. For 3 centuries, Sol 3, the third planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, the humans have refused our final ultimatum, reported War Coordinator Zephy's. Her crystalline form pulsing with agitation, their response was crude, Vextrans. Mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. The human message had been transmitted across 17 star systems. A single image of a raised middle finger, accompanied by audio of something called the Trooper by an ancient human musical group. The collective xenolinguists had spent weeks analyzing the cultural implications. They mock us, Zephy's continued, but they cannot comprehend what approaches 17-member species, each masters of their own domains. The Kithara death fleets that liquefied entire moons. The Nerati war forms that consumed the Proxima colonies. The Valdric swarm mines that. I know the catalog. Vextron interrupted, his 6 eyes focusing on the tactical display. Earth hung. They're like a blue-green jewel, deceptively peaceful. What troubles me is not their defiance, but their confidence. 300 years ago, humanity had been a pre-FTL species confined to their single world. The collective had marked them for eventual integration or elimination, but more pressing concerns had demanded attention. The Andromedan incursion, the Void Plague, the quantum storms that had ravaged the outer rim. Now, as the collective's expansion finally reached this forgotten backwater, they had discovered something unprecedented. Humanity had not only achieved faster than light travel, but had established colonies across 43 systems. More disturbing still, they had done so without the collective's permission or even awareness. Show me the recent reconnaissance data, Vextron commanded. The holographic display shifted, revealing grainy images captured by stealth probes. Human vessels moved through space with an aggressive efficiency that made even battle-hardened collective officers uneasy. Their ships were angular, brutal things that seemed designed for war rather than exploration. Where other species built elegant curves and flowing lines, humans created geometric nightmares bristling with weapons. They fight constantly, Zephy's observed. Not just external threats, they war against each other. Our analysts count 17 separate human factions, many locked in active conflict, a species at war with itself. Vextron mused. Fascinating, and their military capabilities? Primitive by our standards, but Zephy's hesitated. There are anomalies. Their tactical doctrine emphasizes rapid adaptation and what they call acceptable losses. They employ strategies our war games classify as suicidal, yet somehow achieve victory. The neural interface hummed as Vextron accessed classified files. The collective's first contact with humanity had occurred 6 months ago, when a human exploration vessel had stumbled into the disputed Kepler 442 system. The ship, a crude metal cylinder called the Defiant, had been surrounded by a full collective patrol fleet. The humans had surrendered immediately, offering to negotiate, but during the seemingly cordial first contact protocols, they had deployed microscopic surveillance drones throughout the collective vessels. When the talks concluded and the humans departed, they had left behind a gift: complete technical specifications for collective shield generators, FTL drives, and weapon systems. They reverse-engineered our technology in 6 months, Vextron said quietly, not just understood it, improved it. The Valdric swarm mines required centuries to achieve such understanding, Zephy's replied. The humans accomplished it in less than a season, but that wasn't the worst of it. The worst was what the humans had done next. Instead of preparing defenses or fleeing to distant systems, they had begun broadcasting a message across known space, not to the collective, to its enemies. Status report on the Andromedans, Vextron demanded. The display shifted again, showing deep space sensor readings from the galactic edge. For the first time in 3 centuries, Andromedan ships were moving, not the scattered raiders that occasionally tested the collective's borders, but full battle fleets. Massive constructs that dwarfed even the collective's greatest dreadnoughts were advancing toward the Spiral Arm's inhabited systems. Estimated time until they reached the outer territories? Vextron asked. 18 months, assuming current velocity, Zephy's responded. The humans somehow convinced them that the collective was weakened, that now was the time to strike. Vextron's neural interface flared with sudden understanding. The humans hadn't just reverse-engineered collective technology, they had used it to contact the Andromedans, But more than that, they had shared the technical specifications, giving humanity's ancient enemies the keys to the collective's most guarded secrets. They're not just preparing to fight us, he realized. They're preparing to fight alongside our enemies. The implications were staggering. Humanity had spent 6 months turning the galaxy into a powder keg, positioning themselves as the match that would ignite it. They had awakened powers that had slumbered for centuries, stirred ancient hatreds, and somehow convinced themselves they could survive the resulting conflagration. "Sir," Scifi said, her voice tight with something that might have been fear. "There's something else. Our deep space monitors have detected massive energy signatures from the Sol system. The humans are building something in the asteroid belt, something that generates power readings comparable to our core worlds." Vexrin stared at the tactical display, at the small blue world that had somehow become the center of a galactic storm. In 3 centuries of expansion, the collective had encountered species that were stronger, faster, more technologically advanced. But they had never encountered a species that was truly alien in its thinking. "Prepare the fleet," he commanded. "All 17 member species, full war mobilization. We end this before it begins." As the command nexus erupted in activity, Vexrin found himself wondering if they were making a terrible mistake. The humans hadn't just refused to surrender. They had declared war on the entire established order of the galaxy, and somehow, impossibly, they seemed to believe they could win. The collective's advanced fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system like a swarm of mechanical locusts, 1,200 ships strong, representing the combined naval might of 7 species. They formed a perfect sphere around the star that had birthed humanity's ambitions. War Coordinator Scifi stood at the command nexus of the flagship Eternal Dominion, her crystalline form pulsing with anticipation. The tactical display showed the inner system in perfect detail. Mars crawled with industrial complexes. The asteroid belt swarmed with mining operations, and Earth itself was surrounded by orbital fortresses that bristled with weaponry. "Human fleet strength?" she inquired. "Approximately 300 vessels," reported Tactical Adept Corvus, his segmented carapace clicking with mechanical precision. "Primitive designs. But they've incorporated our stolen technology. Estimated combat effectiveness, minimal." Scifi nodded. The mathematics were simple enough, even accounting for the humans' reported tactical cunning. The collective held a 4-to-1 advantage in ships, with vastly superior technology and centuries of combat experience. This would be a demonstration, not a battle. "Transmit the standard surrender demand," she ordered. The communication lasted exactly 37 seconds. The human response was delivered by a grizzled female with gray hair and scars across her face, identifying herself as Admiral Kira Thorne of the Terran Defense Coalition Collective Forces. She said, her voice carrying a calm that was somehow more unsettling than rage. "You have entered sovereign human space without authorization. You have 1 hour to withdraw, or we will consider you hostile." The command nexus fell silent. Scifi felt her crystalline structure resonating with disbelief. Did she just threaten us? "Threat assessment protocols confirm," Corvus replied. "The human called Thorne has issued a combat ultimatum." 1 hour, Scifi repeated, her voice carrying harmonics of incredulous laughter. "Very well. When the hour passes, we will show them the price of defiance." 58 minutes later, the humans attacked. The assault began with the asteroid belt itself. What the collective had assumed were mining operations revealed their true purpose as massive railguns emerged from camouflaged installations. Projectiles the size of small buildings accelerated to near-light speed, crossing the void between Mars and the collective fleet in minutes. The first salvo struck the outer perimeter vessels. With devastating effect, collective shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, proved inadequate against kinetic projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. The dreadnought Crimson Harmony simply disintegrated, its molecular bonds unable to withstand the impact. 2 more ships followed within seconds. "Impossible," Corvus chittered. "Kinetic weapons cannot achieve such velocities without—" His words were cut off as the human fleet engaged. Their ships moved with a coordination that defied their supposed primitive technology, executing maneuvers that would have been impressive for a species with centuries of space combat experience. But more than their skill, it was their tactics that sent shivers through the collective's war matrix. The humans fought like they were already dead. The destroyer Vengeance stuffed directly into the center of the collective formation. Its weapons blazing, it absorbed enough firepower to destroy a small moon. its hull vaporizing section by section, but it never stopped firing. Even as its reactor core reached critical mass, the ship's AI continued targeting solutions. Its final act of suicide run that took 3 collective vessels with it. They're not retreating, Zephy's observed, her voice tight with something approaching. Respect. They're not even attempting to preserve their forces across the battle space. Similar scenes played out. Human ships charged into impossible odds, their crews apparently unconcerned with survival. The frigate Dauntless rammed a collective cruiser, its captain screaming something about "Remember Proxima" over the communication channels. The cruiser's shields held for exactly 3 seconds before both vessels vanished in a nuclear fireball. But the humans weren't simply throwing their lives away. Each suicide run was calculated, precise, designed to maximize damage to collective formations. They had studied the enemy's tactics, identified weaknesses, and crafted a doctrine that turned their own mortality into a weapon. Human casualties? Zephy's demanded. 73 ships destroyed, Corvus reported. Estimated crew losses, 22,000, and our losses 41 ships destroyed, 78 damaged. Crew casualties, approximately 90,000. Zephy's felt her structure dimming with shock. The humans were achieving a kill ratio that should have been impossible. They were not just fighting a technologically superior enemy, they were winning. Analysis, she ordered. The tactical display shifted, showing the battle from a strategic perspective. The human fleet had been organized into 3 formations, each one designed to exploit a different aspect of collective doctrine. The first wave had drawn the fleet into a tight formation, maximizing the effectiveness of the asteroid belt's railguns. The second wave had targeted command and control vessels, disrupting the collective's coordinated response. The third wave. Where is the third wave? Zephy's asked. Her answer came in the form of proximity alarms. The human ships had used the battle as a distraction, allowing the strike force to approach the collective fleet from the system's outer edge. But these weren't normal ships. They were moving at velocities that defied physics, their signatures barely registering on sensors. Stealth ships, Corvus announced. They're using some form of dimensional phasing technology. The stealth ships struck the collective rear guard like ghosts made solid. They appeared from nowhere, fired with surgical precision, and vanished again before return fire could be targeted. The dreadnought Sovereign will found itself under attack from weapons that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its shields useless against projectiles that phased in and out of normal space. They're inside a defensive perimeter. Zephy's realized they'd been there all along, waiting. The battle that followed was unlike anything in the collective's recorded history. The humans fought with a savage intelligence that turned every engagement into a trap. Their ships moved in patterns that seemed random until the moment they achieved perfect coordination, striking at weak points with devastating efficiency. The cruiser Eternal Vigilance was destroyed by a human vessel that had been presumed dead, its crew somehow managing to restore power long enough for one final torpedo salvo. The battleship Infinite Majesty was crippled by a coordinated attack from 6 human fighters. Their combined firepower focused on a single structural weakness. We're losing, Corvus reported, his voice carrying harmonics of disbelief. The humans are systematically dismantling our fleet. Zephy stared at the tactical display, watching as the mathematics of warfare turned against everything she had been taught. The collective wasn't just being defeated, they were being outfought by a species that had achieved space flight within the last 3 centuries. Fall back to the edge of the system, she ordered. Prepare for full withdrawal. But as the collective fleet began its retreat, Admiral Thorne's voice crackled across the communication channels one final time. Collective forces, she said, her tone carrying the weight of absolute certainty. You came here to end humanity. Instead, you've awakened something that should have remained sleeping. We are not the threat you need to fear. We are the warning of what comes next. As the last collective ships fled the Sol system, Zephy's understood that the war had only just begun. The collective's inner council convened in the sacred halls of Nexus Prime, where the 17 species that comprised the galactic government had maintained peace for over 8 centuries. The crystalline chamber resonated with harmonics of barely contained panic, as war leaders from across known space gathered to address the impossible. Humanity had not only survived first contact, but had inflicted casualties that bordered on catastrophic. Supreme Coordinator Vextran's 6 eyes swept across the assembly, noting the tension that radiated from every species present. The Cathara delegation's bioluminescent patterns flickered with barely suppressed aggression. The Nerati warforms stood in perfect formation, ready for battle. Even the normally serene Valdric swarm minds pulsed with agitation. The initial engagement was a disaster, Vextran announced, his voice carrying across the chamber through neural interfaces that connected every member of the collective. We lost 217 ships, with 400 more requiring extensive repairs. Human casualties were minimal. A wave of shocked harmonics rippled through the assembly. Battle Commander Tice of the Kithara Death Fleets rose on her Manus-like legs, her compound eyes blazing with fury. The humans employed suicide tactics, she declared. They fight without regard for their own survival. This is not warfare, it is madness, madness that proves effective, countered Hive Nexus rule of the Nerati. Their tactical doctrine transforms individual ships into weapons. They have weaponized their own mortality. Vextran activated the central display, showing reconnaissance data from the aftermath of the Sol system engagement. The images were deeply disturbing. Human shipyards had gone into full production mode, their industrial capacity expanding at rates that defied conventional understanding. Where the collective had expected to find a broken enemy, they found a species that had used the battle as a learning experience. They're not rebuilding, Vextran explained. They're upgrading. Every ship that returns from combat carries new adaptations. They're evolving their technology in real time. War Coordinator Zephyr materialized at the center of the chamber, her crystalline form still bearing the stress fractures from the Sol system defeat. The humans have done something unprecedented, she reported. They've reverse-engineered not just our technology, but our tactical doctrine. They know how we think, how we fight, how we organize our fleets. Then we adapt, Tice declared. The Kithara have faced adaptive enemies before. We will simply modify our approach. The Kithara Death Fleets will lead the next assault, Vextran decided. Full mobilization, every ship, every weapon, every warrior. We will show the humans what happens when they awaken the fury of the collective. 3 weeks later, the Kithara Death Fleets arrived at the Proxima Centauri system, humanity's first interstellar colony. The armada was magnificent to behold. 600 vessels of pure destruction, each one a work of art crafted from living metal and crystallized energy. They had annihilated civilizations that had ruled entire galactic arms. Battle Commander Tice stood at the center of her flagship Crimson Eternity, her Manus-like form perfectly adapted for the neural interface that connected her to every ship. In the fleet, the Kithara fought as a single organism, their thoughts and reactions synchronized through quantum entanglement that allowed instantaneous coordination across vast distances. Human forces detected, reported her tactical adept, approximately 100 vessels. Standard defensive formation around the colony world. Tice felt satisfaction ripple through the fleet mind. The numbers were even more favorable than at Sol. The humans had spread their forces thin, trying to defend multiple systems simultaneously. They were about to learn that the collective's patience had limits. Commence liquidation protocol, she ordered. The Kithara attack was a thing of terrible beauty. Their ships moved in perfect synchronization, creating overlapping fields of fire that turned empty space into a killing ground. The first wave of human defenders disintegrated under the assault, their primitive shields no match for weapons that could boil the atmosphere off a planet. But then the humans did something that made Tice's compound eyes widen with shock. They adapted. The second wave of human ships moved differently, their formation shifting to account for the Kithara's synchronized attack patterns. They had analyzed the first minutes of battle and completely reorganized their tactics. Ships that had been fighting independently suddenly began coordinating their movements, creating interference patterns that disrupted the Kithara's quantum entanglement. Impossible, Tice chittered. They cannot adapt that quickly. No species possesses such neural flexibility. Her answer came in the form of a communication from the human fleet commander, a scarred veteran who identified himself as Admiral Marcus Crow. Kithara forces, he said, his voice carrying an edge of grim satisfaction. You fight like a single organism. That makes you predictable. The human fleet suddenly dispersed, each ship moving on an independent vector. The Kithara's synchronized attacks, designed to overwhelm concentrated formations, proved ineffective against targets that refused to maintain formation. Worse, the humans had somehow created interference patterns that disrupted the quantum entanglement, connecting the Kithara fleet. They're jamming our neural links, Tice realized. But that's impossible. They don't have the technology. They don't need it. Her tactical adept reported. They're using our own quantum signatures against us. Every time we synchronize, they create a counter-resonance that breaks the connection. The battle that followed was a masterpiece of adaptive warfare. The humans fought like they were conducting an experiment, testing different approaches against the Kithara's various formations. Each engagement taught them something new, and they incorporated those lessons into their tactics within minutes. The destroyer Relentless engaged 3 Kithara vessels simultaneously, using their synchronized movements against them by targeting the lead ship's quantum transmitter. The human captain caused a cascade failure that left all 3 vessels unable to coordinate their attacks. They were destroyed by their own crossfire. The cruiser Defiance used the Kithara's living metal against them, deploying a viral code that corrupted the ship's adaptive systems. The Kithara vessels began changing their configurations randomly, their hulls flowing like liquid as they lost control of their own biology. "We're losing ships faster than they are," Tice admitted, her voice carrying harmonics of disbelief. "The humans are turning our strengths into weaknesses." The final blow came when the humans revealed their true purpose. The battle had been a distraction, allowing human strike teams to infiltrate the Kithara fleet using captured technology. The teams had spent the entire engagement planning devices throughout the Kithara ships, devices that activated simultaneously. "What are those readings?" Tice demanded. Her tactical adept's reply was cut off as explosions blossomed throughout the fleet. The humans had turned the Kithara's own quantum entanglement against them, creating a cascade of destruction that leaped from ship to ship through the neural links. The fleet mind that had been the Kithara's greatest strength became a pathway for annihilation. In the span of 30 seconds, the Kithara Death Fleet's the most feared naval force in the galaxy ceased to exist. Admiral Crow's voice crackled across the communication channels as the last Kithara ships disintegra. "Ted, collective forces," he said, his tone carrying the weight of prophecy. "You set your best to destroy us. Instead, you've taught us how to fight like you. We are no longer the species you first encountered. We are something new, something you helped create." As the debris of the Kithara fleet drifted through space, Tice understood that the war had entered a new phase. The humans weren't just fighting for survival, they were using each battle to evolve, to become something that could challenge the established order of the galaxy. And they were winning. The emergency session of the collective's inner council took place in the depths of Nexus Prime, beneath layers of quantum shielding that had protected the galaxy's seat of power. For 8 centuries, the crystalline chambers were designed to inspire awe and reverence, but now they felt like a tomb. The assembled representatives of 17 species sat in stunned silence as the implications of their latest defeat sank in. Supreme Coordinator Vextran's 6 eyes reflected the holographic displays that showed the scattered debris of the Kithara Death Fleets. In 3 days, humanity had eliminated the most feared naval force in the galaxy, turning the collective's greatest strength, their unity, into a weapon of mass destruction. "The humans have done more than defeat us," Vextran announced, his voice carrying across the chamber through neural interfaces that hummed with barely contained panic. "They have learned to fight like us. Every engagement teaches them our tactics, our technology, our way of thinking. We are not just losing battles, we are creating our own replacements." Battle Coordinator Nexus Rolla the Nerati stood, his war form towering above the assembly. The Nerati were living weapons, their bodies adapted for combat through generations of genetic modification. They had never known defeat in direct combat. "The solution is simple," Zrod declared, his voice carrying the harmonics of absolute certainty. "We stop fighting them like a conventional enemy. We stop giving them opportunities to learn and adapt. We eliminate them before they can respond." "What do you propose?" asked High Mistress Thilla of the Valdric Swarm Mines. "Total sterilization," Zrod replied. "We bypass their fleets entirely. We target their worlds directly, using weapons that leave no survivors and no opportunity to adapt. We turn their planets into molten slag." A wave of shocked harmonics rippled through the assembly. The collective had always prided itself on being civilized conquerors, offering integration rather than extinction. They had rules, protocols, standards that had maintained galactic peace for centuries. "The Galactic Concordat forbids planetary sterilization," Vextran said quietly. "It has been the foundation of our civilization for the Galactic Concordat." "Did not account for humans," Zrol interrupted. "They are not a conventional species. They are a viral infection that adapts to every treatment. The only cure is complete eradication." War Coordinator Zephy's materialized at the center of the chamber, her crystalline form dim with exhaustion. The humans have already anticipated this approach, she reported. Our long-range sensors detect massive evacuation efforts throughout human space. They're abandoning their fixed positions, moving their populations to mobile platforms. Then, we hunt them down, Zrol declared. The Nerati warforms will lead deep strike missions into human space. We will find them wherever they hide. Vextran felt the weight of 8 centuries of civilization pressing down upon him. Everything the collective had built was based on the assumption that warfare had rules, that there were lines that civilized species would not cross. The humans had already crossed every line, and now they were forcing the collective to do the same. Approved, he said finally. Operation Cleansing Fire is authorized. The Nerati will lead, supported by the Valdric swarm mines and the surviving Kithara forces. No prisoners, no negotiations, no mercy. The Nerati war fleet that departed Nexus Prime was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 800 vessels, each one a living weapon designed for a single purpose, the complete elimination of organic life. They carried planet crackers that could shatter worlds, viral weapons that could sterilize entire biospheres, and quantum bombs that could unmake matter at the molecular level. Battle Coordinator Zrol stood at the center of his flagship Eternal Hunger. His warform directly interfaced with the ship's living systems. The Nerati had evolved beyond the need for separate vessels. Their ships were extensions of their own biology, responding to thought and emotion with perfect precision. Target analysis complete, reported his tactical symbiont. 17 human colonies identified, ranging from mining outposts to major population centers. Estimated total population 2 billion humans. Begin with the outer colonies, Zrol ordered. Leave no survivors, no wreckage, no evidence that humanity ever existed. The first target was Kepler 44b, a mining world with a population of 50,000 humans. The Nerati approach was methodical and brutal. They surrounded the planet with a sphere of destruction, their weapons turning the world's surface into a sea of molten metal. The humans had no time to fight back, no opportunity to adapt or learn. They simply ceased to exist. The second target was Gliese 667cc, an agricultural world that fed half of human space. The Nerati used a different approach. Here, deploying viral weapons that corrupted the planet's biosphere at the genetic level. The world died slowly, its ecosystem collapsing as every living thing turned against itself. The third target was Wolf 359, a research station that had been studying collective technology. The Nerati used quantum bombs, weapons that unraveled the fundamental forces holding matter together. The station, its research, as 3,000 inhabitants were reduced to their component atoms. Human response, Zrol inquired. Minimal, his tactical symbiont reported. Some evacuation efforts, but they appear to be in full retreat. Long-range sensors detect human fleets moving toward the galactic edge. Zrol felt satisfaction ripple through his warform. The humans were finally learning that they could not fight the collective directly. They were running, abandoning their territory, accepting that their expansion into the galaxy was over. The Nerati advance continued, systematically eliminating human colonies with mechanical efficiency. But as they reached the fourth target, a military outpost in the Tau Ceti system, they discovered that the humans had not been retreating. They had been preparing. The Tau Ceti system was a trap. The human fleet that emerged from hyperspace was unlike anything the collective had encountered. These ships were not the crude metal cylinders of their earlier encounters, but sleek vessels that seemed to bend light around their hulls. They moved with impossible grace, their formations shifting and flowing like living things. Impossible, Zrol chittered. They cannot have developed such technology in mere weeks. His answer came in the form of a communication from the human fleet commander, a woman who identified herself as Admiral Elena Vasquez. Nerati forces, she said, her voice carrying an edge of cold fury. You have murdered 1 billion innocent people. You have crossed a line that should never be crossed. Now you will learn what humans become when you take everything from them. The battle that followed was not warfare, it was systematic annihilation. The human ships moved with coordination that defied physics, their weapons targeting not just Nerati vessels, but the living systems that comprised them. They had learned to fight not just the Nerati's technology, but their biology. The Nerati warform Crimson Fury found itself under attack from weapons that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Its living hull began to convulse as human viruses corrupted its genetic structure, turning its own adaptive systems against it. The ship literally ate itself from the inside out. They're using our own weapons against us. Zro realized they've weaponized our biology. The cruiser Endless Hunger was destroyed by a single human torpedo that phased through its shields and detonated inside its neural core. The ship's death scream was transmitted across the fleet mine, causing cascade failures in neighboring vessels. The humans had learned to turn the Nerati's shared consciousness into a weapon. Fleet casualties? Zro demanded, 60% and rising, his tactical symbiote reported. The humans are systematically dismantling our formations. They know exactly where to strike to maximize damage. As the last Nerati ships burned in the void, Admiral Vasquez's voice crackled across the communication channels one final time. Collective forces, she said, her tone carrying the weight of absolute judgment. You tried to make us extinct. Instead, you've taught us to fight without mercy. We are no longer the species that sought peaceful coexistence. We are the species that will end you. The survivors of the Nerati war fleet limped back to collective space, carrying with them the terrible knowledge that humanity had evolved beyond recognition. They were no longer fighting a primitive species, they were fighting something that had learned to use the collective's own power against them, and the humans were just getting started. The Battle of the Nexus approach began with the largest military mobilization in galactic history. The collective's remaining forces, over 3,000 ships representing the combined might of 17 species, formed a defensive line at the edge of the Nexus Prime system. Every weapon that had conquered the galaxy was arrayed in perfect formation, waiting for humanity's response to the Nerati sterilization campaign. Supreme Coordinator Vextrid stood at the center of the command nexus, his 6 eyes focused on the tactical displays that showed the approaching human fleet. What he saw defied every principle of warfare he had learned in 3 centuries of command. How many ships? He asked, though he already knew the answer would be impossible. Sensors detect approximately 1,500 vessels, reported War Coordinator Zephy's, her crystalline form pulsing with barely controlled panic. But the energy signatures are unlike anything we've encountered. They're not just ships, they're weapons platforms the size of small moons. The human fleet that emerged from hyperspace was a testament to their species' terrifying adaptability. In the months since the collective's campaign began, they had not only rebuilt their forces, but had fundamentally reimagined the nature of warfare itself. Their ships were massive constructs that bristled with weapons, taken from every species they had defeated, combined with technologies that seemed to violate the laws of physics. At the center of the human formation was a vessel that dwarfed even the collective's greatest dreadnoughts. The Retribution was less a ship than a mobile fortress, its hull constructed from living Cathara metal that had been infected with Nerati viral systems and powered by Valdric quantum cores. It was a monument to humanity's ability to take their enemy's greatest strengths and turn them into weapons. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Retribution, her scarred face reflecting the glow of tactical displays that showed the collective's defensive formation. Around her, the command crew worked with mechanical precision, their movements coordinated by neural interfaces that connected every human ship in the fleet. Collective forces, she broadcast across all frequencies, her voice carrying the weight of 2 billion dead. You have one opportunity to surrender. Lay down your weapons and submit to judgment for your crimes against humanity. The response came from Vextrid himself, his harmonics carrying the authority of 8 centuries of galactic dominance. Humanity will not dictate terms to the collective. You are a single species among thousands. You will be integrated or eliminated. Then you have chosen elimination, Vasquez replied. All ships, commence Operation Nemesis. Show them what monsters they have created. The battle began with the asteroid belt around Nexus Prime itself. What the collective had assumed were natural formations revealed themselves as massive weapons platforms, their surfaces erupting with railguns that fired projectiles at relativistic speeds. The outer perimeter of the collective defense was shattered in the first minutes of battle, hundreds of ships simply disintegrating under the kinetic bombardment. But the humans had learned that kinetic weapons were only the beginning. As the collective fleet moved to close the distance, they discovered that humanity had weaponized every aspect of their enemy's biology. The space between the fleets filled with crystalline spores that latched onto collective ships, their molecular structure designed to corrupt the quantum shields that protected the vessels. The Valdric swarm mind Infinite Harmony found itself under attack from weapons that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Its hull began to phase in and out of normal space as human reality warpers targeted the quantum cores. That powered the ship. The vessel literally tore itself apart, trying to exist in conflicting states of matter. "They're using our own technology against us," High Mistress Thilla observed, her voice carrying harmonics of disbelief. "They've learned to manipulate quantum space itself." The Kithara remnants, fighting with desperate fury, discovered that their living metal had been turned into a virus. Human ships fired projectiles that seemed harmless until they made contact with Kithara hulls, then began converting the living metal into a cancerous growth that consumed the ships from within. The dreadnought Eternal Majesty was consumed by its own hull, the living metal turning against the crew in a frenzy of uncontrolled growth. Casualty report. Vextran demanded. For 100 ships destroyed in the first hour, Zephy's reported. The humans are systematically dismantling our formations. They know exactly how to target our weaknesses. But the collective's losses were only the beginning. The human fleet had divided into specialized formations, each one designed to exploit a different aspect of their enemy's biology and technology. The Nerati war forms found themselves under attack from viruses that turned their adaptive systems into weapons of self-destructs. The Valdric swarm minds discovered that their quantum entanglement could be used to transmit destructive interference patterns directly into their neural cores. The cruiser harmonic convergence exploded as human hackers infiltrated its AI systems, turning its own weapons against neighboring ships. The destroyer Perfect Order was consumed by a cascade failure. When human quantum bombs disrupted the fundamental forces holding its matter together, Admiral Vasquez watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. Every collective ship destroyed was a small payment on the debt owed for 2 billion human lives. But she knew that the real test was yet to come. The collective still outnumbered humanity 2-1, and their remaining ships were the most powerful in the galaxy. Phase 2, she ordered, target their command vessels. The human assault shifted focus, concentrating on the massive command ships that coordinated the collective's response. The Retribution itself led the charge, its weapons, systems powered by the combined technology of every species humanity had defeated. Kithara living metal formed adaptive armor that reshaped itself to deflect incoming fire. Nerati viral systems infected enemy shields, causing them to turn against their own ships. Valdric quantum cores provided power levels that allowed the ship to fire continuously without pause. The collective flagship Eternal Dominion found itself under direct assault from 3 human dreadnoughts. Its crystalline hull, designed to resonate with harmonic frequencies that could shatter molecular bonds, proved vulnerable to human sonic weapons that created interference patterns. In the crystal structure, the ship began to tear itself apart. As its own hull resonated at destructive frequencies, "We're losing coordination," Zephy's reported, her crystalline form flickering as stress fractures spread through her structure. "The humans are targeting our command and control systems." Vextran felt the weight of 8 centuries pressing down upon him. The collective had never faced an enemy that could adapt and evolve in real time, learning from every engagement and incorporating new technologies with impossible speed. They were not just fighting humanity, they were fighting a species that had absorbed the best aspects of every enemy they had encountered. "All ships, emergency formation Omega-7, he ordered. Concentrate all firepower on the human flagship." The remaining collective vessels, nearly 2,000 strong, turned their weapons on the Retribution. The combined firepower of 17 species focused on a single target, enough energy to sterilize entire solar systems. The space around the human flagship became a cauldron of destruction as exotic matter beams, quantum disruptors, and reality-warping weapons converged on their target. For a moment, it seemed as if the concentrated assault might succeed. The Retribution shields flickered under the incredible bombardment, its living metal hull beginning to show signs of stress. But then the ship did something that defied every principle of defensive warfare. It opened fire on itself. The Retribution's weapons turned inward, targeting specific points on its own hull with surgical precision. The damage patterns created resonance points that channeled the collective's attack into harmonic frequencies, turning the ship itself into a massive amplifier. The redirected energy beam that emerged from the human flagship was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The beam carved through the collective formation like a sword through silk. Entire squadrons simply ceased to exist, their molecular bonds dissolved by energies that warped space-time itself. The dreadnought Sovereign Might was caught in the direct path of the beam and vanished so completely that not even debris remained. "Impossible," Vextran whispered. They turned our own attack against us, sir, Zephy's reported, her voice carrying harmonics of despair. We've lost over half our remaining fleet. The humans are using weapons that shouldn't exist. The battle raged for 6 more hours, each minute bringing fresh horrors as humanity demonstrated new ways to turn the collective strengths into weaknesses. Human ships that should have been destroyed continued fighting, their AI systems maintaining combat effectiveness even as their hulls were reduced to molten slag. Others seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making them nearly impossible to target while they struck at will. The BlackHFY ship Perfect Unity was destroyed when human reality warpers created a localized time dilation field around it. The ship aged centuries and seconds, its crew dying of old age while the vessel itself crumbled to dust. The Nerati warform endless appetite was consumed by its own viral systems. When human hackers turned its adaptive biology against itself as the battle reached its climax, Admiral Vasquez opened a final communication to the remaining collective forces Supreme Coordinator Vextran. She said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute judgment. Your fleet is broken. Your ships are burning. Your crews are dying. But I want you to understand something before this ends. The tactical display around Vextran showed the truth of the 3,000 ships that had begun the battle. Fewer than 500 remained functional. The human fleet, despite taking heavy casualties, still maintained combat effectiveness. They had not just survived the largest military engagement in galactic history, they had won it. You created us, Vasquez continued. Every battle you fought against us made us stronger. Every weapon you used against us became our weapon. Every tactic you employed became our tactic. You wanted to eliminate humanity, but instead you gave birth to something that will reshape the galaxy. The remnants of the collective fleet began to break formation, individual ships fleeing toward the outer system as the chain of command collapsed. The Battle of the Nexus approach was over, and humanity had achieved the impossible. They had defeated the combined might of 17 species, using weapons and tactics learned from their enemies. But as Vextran watched his civilization crumble around him, he realized that the real horror was yet to come. The humans hadn't just won a battle, they had proven that they could absorb and improve upon any technology they encountered. They were no longer a single species fighting for survival. They had become something entirely new, something that would not be satisfied with mere victory. They had become the new apex predator of the galaxy, and their appetite was just beginning. The core worlds of the collective burned. Supreme Coordinator Vextran stood in the ruins of the Nexus Prime Command Center, surrounded by the shattered remnants of 8 centuries of galactic civilization. Through the cracked transparent aluminum viewports, he could see human ships in orbit, their sleek forms silhouetted against the dying light of the system's star. The impossible had become reality. Humanity had not only survived the collective's attempt at genocide, but had conquered the seat of galactic power itself. Casualty reports from the core worlds. War Coordinator Zephy's announced, her crystalline form dim and fractured from the stress of defeat. Thymallus Prime, 17 billion Cathar dead or missing. Nerati Sector Command, complete biosphere collapse, estimated 12 billion casualties. The Valdra Quantum Cities, they simply vanished. 24 billion minds gone. Vextran felt the weight of those numbers crushing down upon him. In less than a year, humanity had inflicted casualties that exceeded every war in the collective's recorded history. They had not just defeated the galaxy's greatest military powers, they had absorbed them, turning each conquered species' technology and biology into weapons of even greater destruction. How many worlds? He asked quietly. 137. Core worlds destroyed or evacuated, Zephy's replied. The outer territories are in complete chaos. Local governors are surrendering without engagement, hoping to avoid the fate of the military worlds. Through the neural interface that connected him to the collective's remaining communication networks, Vextran could feel the terror radiating from across the galaxy. Species that had ruled entire sectors for millennia were fleeing into deep space, abandoning territories they had held for thousands of years. The very fabric of galactic civilization was unraveling. Sir, came a trembling voice from the communications array. We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. The holographic display activated, showing the bridge of the human flagship Retribution. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood at its center, but she was no longer entirely human. Her left arm had been replaced with living Cathara metal that pulsed with its own bioluminescence. Her eyes held the multi-dimensional depth of Valdra quantum consciousness. Neural interfaces grew from her skull like crystalline horns, connecting her directly to the ship's systems. She had become something new, something that incorporated the best aspects of every species she had defeated. Supreme Coordinator Vexrin, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through multiple dimensions. The collective surrender is demanded. Your species will be integrated into the new galactic order, or they will be eliminated. You have 1 hour to decide. Vexrin stared at the creature that had once been human, understanding finally what his species had awakened. What are you? He asked. We are what you made us, Vasquez replied. We are the species that learn to fight like Kithara, to adapt like Nerati, to think like Valdric. We are the species that you taught to survive by becoming better than our enemies. You wanted to eliminate humanity. Instead, you created humanity's successors. The transmission ended, leaving Vexrin alone with the weight of his civilization's destruction. Around him, the few remaining members of the Inner Council waited for his decision. Representatives of 17 species that had once ruled the galaxy now looked to him for salvation that did not exist. Options, he asked. We could evacuate to the Outer Rim, suggested High Mistress Thilla, her swarm mind fractured by the loss of so many connected intelligences. Gather what remains of our forces, attempt to rebuild beyond human reach. They would follow us. Scifi stated flatly, they've absorbed our technology, our biology, our tactical doctrine. There is nowhere in this galaxy we could hide that. They could not find us. That we fight, declared Battle Coordinator's role. His Nerati war form scarred by countless defeats. We make our last stand here, in the heart of our civilization. If we must die, let us die with honor. Vexrin considered the options, each one leading to the same inevitable conclusion. The collective could not win through conventional warfare. The humans had proven that repeatedly. They could not hide humanity's technological superiority made concealment impossible. They could not negotiate. The humans had made their position clear. But there was one option left. One final card that the collective had never played because it violated every principle they held. Sacred. Activate the Omega Protocol, Vexrin commanded. The chamber fell silent. The Omega Protocol was the collective's final failsafe, a weapon so terrible that its very existence had been classified. Beyond the highest security clearances, it was designed not to win wars, but to ensure that if the collective fell, nothing would survive to claim victory. Sir, Scifi said carefully, the Omega Protocol will sterilize every world within 50 light-years of Nexus Prime. That includes 17 core worlds, billions of collective citizens, and the human fleet. Vexrin finished. If we cannot save our civilization, then we will ensure that the species that destroyed it does not survive to corrupt the rest of the galaxy. The Omega device was buried deep within Nexus Prime's core, a quantum singularity bomb that had been constructed during the collective's earliest wars. It was designed to create a cascading collapse of space-time itself, turning entire solar systems into gravitational anomalies that would consume everything within their reach. Activation requires unanimous consent from the Inner Council, Zephy's noted. One by one, the representatives of 17 species gave their consent. The Kithara delegate, her compound eyes dim with despair. The Nerati coordinator, his war form trembling with suppressed rage. The Valdric hive mind, its quantum consciousness fractured, but still coherent enough to understand the implications. They were choosing mutual annihilation over submission to a species they had created through their own hubris. Omega Protocol activated, the command system announced. Detonation in 60 minutes. Vexrin opened a communication channel to the human fleet. Admiral Vasquez, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute finality. The collective rejects your demands. In 57 minutes, the Omega device will detonate, creating a quantum singularity that will consume this entire region of space, your fleet, our worlds. Everything within 50 light-years will be reduced to component atoms. The response came immediately. You're willing to commit suicide rather than surrender? We are willing to prevent our conquerors from spreading their infection to the rest of the galaxy. Vexrin replied, you have absorbed the worst aspects of every species you have defeated. You have become something that should not exist. The collective dies today, but so does humanity. Admiral Vasquez's image flickered, her hybrid features showing something that might have been respect. You would sacrifice billions of your own people to stop us, to stop what you would become. Yes, Vexrin answered, the galaxy will survive. Without the collective, It will not survive what humanity becomes if allowed to continue. The communication ended, and Vextran felt a strange sense of peace. The collective's 8 centuries of dominance were ending, but they were ending on their own terms. The human threat would be eliminated. The galaxy would be free to evolve without the cancer that humanity had become. But as the countdown continued, something unexpected happened. The human fleet began to move not away from the blast zone, but toward Nexus Prime itself. Their ships formed a complex formation around the planet, their weapons systems targeting not the collective's remaining defenses, but the planet's core. "What are they doing?" Zephy's asked. Vextran felt the weight of those numbers crushing down upon him. In less than a year, humanity had inflicted casualties that exceeded every war in the collective's recorded history. They had not just defeated the galaxy's greatest military powers, they had absorbed them, turning each conquered species' technology and biology into weapons of even greater destruction. "How many worlds?" he asked quietly. 137 core worlds destroyed or evacuated, Zephy's replied. "The outer territories are in complete chaos. Local governors are surrendering without engagement, hoping to avoid the fate of the military." Worlds. Through the neural interface that connected him to the collective's remaining communication networks, Vextran could feel the terror radiating from across the galaxy. Species that had ruled entire sectors for millennia were fleeing into deep space, abandoning territories they had held for thousands of years. The very fabric of galactic civilization was unraveling. "Sir," came a trembling voice from the communications array. "We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." The holographic display activated, showing the bridge of the human flagship Retribution. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood at its center, but she was no longer entirely human. Her left arm had been replaced with living Cathara metal that pulsed with its own bioluminescence. Her eyes held the multi-dimensional depth of Valdra quantum consciousness. Neural interfaces grew from her skull like crystalline horns, connecting her directly to the ship's systems. She had become something new, something that incorporated the best aspects of every species she had defeated. "Supreme Coordinator Vextran," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through multiple dimensions. "The collective's surrender is demanded. Your species will be integrated into the new galactic order, or they will be eliminated. You have 1 hour to decide." Vextran stared at the creature that had once been human, understanding finally what his species had awakened. "What are you?" he asked. "We are what you made us," Vasquez replied. "We are the species that learn to fight like Cathara, to adapt like Nerati, to think like Valdric. We are the species that you taught to survive by becoming better than our enemies. You wanted to eliminate humanity. Instead, you created humanity's successors." The transmission ended, leaving Vextran alone with the weight of his civilization's destruction. Around him, the few remaining members of the Inner Council waited for his decision. Representatives of 17 species that had once ruled the galaxy now looked to him for salvation that did not exist. "Options?" he asked. "We could evacuate to the Outer Rim," suggested High Mistress Thilla, her swarm mind fractured by the loss of so many connected intelligences. "Gather what remains of our forces, attempt to rebuild beyond human reach. They would follow us." Zephy stated flatly, "They've absorbed our technology, our biology, our tactical doctrine. There is nowhere in this galaxy we could hide that. They could not find us. That we fight," declared Battle Coordinator's role, his Nerati war form scarred by countless defeats. "We make our last stand here, in the heart of our civilization. If we must die, let us die with honor." Vextran considered the options, each one leading to the same inevitable conclusion. The collective could not win through conventional warfare. The humans had proven that repeatedly. They could not hide humanity's technological superiority, made concealment impossible. They could not negotiate. The humans had made their position clear. But there was one option left, one final card that the collective had never played because it violated every principle they held. "Sacred, activate the Omega Protocol," Vextran commanded. The chamber fell silent. The Omega Protocol was the collective's final failsafe, a weapon so terrible that its very existence had been classified. Beyond the highest security clearances, it was designed not to win wars, but to ensure that if the collective fell, nothing would survive to claim victory. "Sir," Zephy said carefully, "the Omega Protocol will sterilize every world within 50 light years of Nexus Prime. That includes 17 core worlds, billions of collective citizens, and the human fleet." Vextran finished. "If we cannot save our civilization, Then we will ensure that the species that destroyed it does not survive to corrupt the rest of the galaxy. The Omega device was buried deep within Nexus Prime's core, a quantum singularity bomb that had been constructed during the Collective's earliest wars. It was designed to create a cascading collapse of space-time itself, turning entire solar systems into gravitational anomalies that would consume everything within their reach. Activation requires unanimous consent from the Inner Council, Zephyrs. Noted, one by one, the representatives of 17 species gave their consent. The Kithara delegate, her compound eyes dim with despair. The neurotic coordinator, his war form trembling with suppressed rage. The Valdric hive mind, its quantum consciousness fractured, but still coherent enough to understand the implications. They were choosing mutual annihilation over submission to a species they had created through their own hubris. Omega Protocol activated, the command system announced. Detonation in 60 minutes. Vexrin opened a communication channel to the human fleet. Admiral Vasquez, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute finality. The Collective rejects your demands. In 57 minutes, the Omega device will detonate, creating a quantum singularity that will consume this entire region of space, your fleet, our worlds. Everything within 50 light years will be reduced to component atoms. The response came immediately. You're willing to commit suicide rather than surrender? We are willing to prevent our conquerors from spreading their infection to the rest of the galaxy. Vexrin replied, you have absorbed the worst aspects of every species you have defeated. You have become something that should not exist. The Collective dies today, but so does humanity. Admiral Vasquez's image flickered, her hybrid features showing something that might have been respect. You would sacrifice billions of your own people to stop us, to stop what you would become. Yes, Vexrin answered, the galaxy will survive without the Collective. It will not survive what humanity becomes if allowed to continue. The communication ended, and Vexrin felt a strange sense of peace. The Collective's 8 centuries of dominance were ending, but they were ending on their own terms. The human threat would be eliminated. The galaxy would be free to evolve without the cancer that humanity had become. But as the countdown continued, something unexpected happened. The human fleet began to move not away from the blast zone, but toward Nexus Prime itself. Their ships formed a complex formation around the planet, their weapons systems targeting not the Collective's remaining defenses, but the planet's core. What are they doing? Zephyrs asked. I am transmitting the final report from the Integration Council. The data that followed was staggering in its scope. In 10 years, the former Collective territory had been transformed from a rigid hierarchical empire into a dynamic confederation of equals. Species that had been enemies for millennia were now working together on projects that would have been impossible for any single civilization to achieve. The Kithara living metal had been combined with human creativity to create structures that could adapt to any environment. The Nerati viral systems had been repurposed to fight disease and extend life across dozens of species. The Valdric quantum consciousness had been integrated with human intuition to create new forms of art and philosophy that transcended any single species' understanding. The Outer Rim worlds have voted to join the Confederation, Vexrin continued. Even the most remote colonies have requested integration protocols. The old order is truly dead. Admiral, what you have built in its place is something unprecedented in galactic history. Vasquez studied the data, noting the areas where integration had been most successful and where challenges remained. The transformation of the galaxy had not been without cost. Billions had died in the wars that preceded the New Order, and the process of integration itself had claimed countless lives as species learned to coexist and merge their technologies. But the results spoke for themselves. Life expectancy had increased across all species. Interstellar travel had become routine rather than dangerous. The constant warfare that had characterized the galaxy for millennia had been replaced by collaborative exploration and development. There is one final matter, Vexrin said, his tone becoming more formal. The Integration Council has voted unanimously on a proposal. We wish to rename the Confederation. Oh, Vasquez asked, intrigued. The Human Confederation has become something beyond humanity, Vexrin explained. It incorporates the best aspects of 17 species, but it is greater than the sum of its parts. We propose to rename it the Synthesis Confederation in honor of what we have all become. Vasquez felt a deep warmth at the gesture. The name was more than symbolic. It represented the fundamental truth that the galaxy's future lay not in the dominance of any single species, but in the synthesis of all species into something greater. Approved, she said, let the galaxy know that the age of empire is over. The age of synthesis has begun. As the transmission ended, Vasquez turned back to the viewport, watching as ships from dozens of species moved through the space around Kepler for to be. Former enemies worked side by side, their technologies and cultures blending into new forms that no single species could have imagined. The irony was not lost on her. The collective had sought to eliminate humanity because they feared what Earth could become. They had been right to fear, but wrong about what that meant. Humanity had not become a destroyer of civilizations. They had become the catalyst that allowed civilizations to transcend their limitations and become something greater. Coordinator Nexus, she said, prepare a message for transmission to the Andromedan fleets. Yes, Admiral, tell them that the Synthesis Confederation welcomes all species willing to contribute to our common future. Tell them that conquest is obsolete, that the future belongs to those who can learn, adapt, and grow together. As the message was transmitted across the galaxy, Vasquez reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. Humanity had begun as a single species on a single world, driven by curiosity and ambition to reach for the stars. They had been nearly destroyed by forces they could barely comprehend, but they had survived by learning to become more than what they were. The collective had feared what Earth could awaken. They had been right to fear, but they had misunderstood the nature of the awakening. It was not the awakening of a destroyer, but the awakening of a synthesizer species that could take the best aspects of any civilization and combine them into something greater. The galaxy would never be the same, where once there had been eternal warfare between species trapped by their own limitations. Now there was the possibility of unlimited growth and cooperation. The Synthesis Confederation was not an ending, but a beginning, the first step toward a future where the boundaries between species were no longer barriers, but opportunities for mutual enhancement. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had taught it to conquer itself, to overcome the limitations that had kept civilizations locked in eternal conflict, and embraced the potential for infinite growth through cooperation and integration. The stars themselves seemed brighter now, filled with the promise of what could be achieved when the best aspects of every species were combined into a single, unstoppable force for progress and discovery. The awakening was complete, the synthesis had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.